Okay, I'm here to give you just a quick rundown on some of the uses and nuances of adding and subtracting friction while using the squirrel, using the tail holes. So as you probably already know, adding and subtracting friction is really easy, just winding through the tail holes. Some of the reasons you might want to use this would be if you're doing a really long rappel, and if you've ever used a device and worry about adding friction while you're coming down on a long rappel, you'll notice if you set it so that you've got enough friction at the bottom, you have too much when you start. So you're getting this really jerky, bouncy ride as you force the rope through. Really bad on the anchor, really bad on the rope, not good. If you rig just a little bit of friction so that it starts out really nice on the long rappel, because you've got all that weight of the rope acting as a brake on your hand, by the time you get to the bottom, you find you're just holding on like crazy onto the rope. Traditional ways of getting around this, some devices will have ears and stuff that you can wrap the rope around. The problem with that is you go from a small amount of friction to a crazy large amount of friction because you're adding a lot of bend to that rope. Or other ways are to put carabiners on a side leg loop and do a Z-rig. Both of those I find not favorable. The Z-rig's kind of complicated and a pain in the butt, and it changes how you use the device. The ears, when you wrap, add too much. With the squirrel, you just simply rig to a low setting of friction so that you can flow easily at the top of the big rappel. And as you go down and find it's getting a little hot and hard to hold on to, you add one. If it becomes a little more hard to hold on to later as you get further down, just add more. So that's one of the uses. One of the other uses of making things nicer with this friction, if you happen to be rappelling down and you've got to rappel at a long horizontal section, like you wrap down, it's a two-stage, you go back 30 or 40 feet and then you wrap down again. You get to the bottom of that first stage, instead of having to fight the rope to get across to that other thing, you just take it out of the tail holes to the lowest friction setting, and then you can easily get yourself to walk toward the other. When you get to the top of the second stage, you just add the friction you want back again, and down you go. Nice and simple. One of the other uses that I like of this is if you're starting a rappel that is actually very awkward to get down onto and start to hang from the rope, you'll find yourself kind of down climbing into position. Personally, I think it makes me feel a little bit safer is to get down almost into that position, give myself just a little bit of slack that I know I can down climb to, and you don't want very much slack in that, just enough to allow yourself a tiny bit of movement, and I'll lock off with all three. That is generally too much friction for me. I can't rappel with all three of these, so that allows me to down climb onto the rappel, maintaining control of the rope just in case something happens, until I've down climbed till I'm fully weighted, and then I just release to the amount of friction that I'm comfortable with and wrap down. One of the nuances that takes a little getting used to, but once you do, it's extremely natural, is if you find yourself going from this friction setting, 0, up to friction level 1, and you find that bump to be too much, you can modulate that friction by just taking out this first bend of rope with hand movement. Moving the rope from here to here will give you just a little bit less friction. And the same goes for all the tail modes. If you happen to be using this one and you bump up and you need more, and you bump up, and you find that that was too much friction, and you find yourself going from too little friction to too much friction, and you can't find that right little medium, again, that second bend caused by the rope, you can take some of that out by just placing your hand this way and straightening out that final bend. That'll modulate you down kind of halfway between those two settings. It takes a little getting used to, but once you've got it, you'll find that you very rarely go from too little to too much. You'll go from too little to too much, and then you'll just naturally go halfway between them. So that covers some of the nuances of adding, subtracting friction, and modulating what you're doing.